Hey guys, I'm going to try something a little different today and do commentary without a script. So, if you think it turned out better, let me know in the comments below so that I can do it a bit more often. Anyway, I recently ordered a bunch of 3D printed models and I came across this treasure goblin from Diablo 3. And I thought he would be interesting to experiment with and practice some object source lighting because it's something I've never done before. This miniature is in 32mm scale, so it's a little bit larger scale-wise of what we're used to with things like Warhammer, which is 28mm. But because the character is quite short anyway, he works out roughly around the same sort of physical size because he's hunched over. Anyway, I'm real eager to try this out, but we're pressed for time. So in this video, I'm just going to focus on the base. And we're going to use this gold as the source of lighting so that we can work on the Goblin next week. This is Cursed Crusader Arts. So I started off by cleaning up the resin, getting rid of all the marks from the support units when the model arrived here. And I'm just going to start by doing a base coat with a Baden black. This is just going to act as a crude form of primer so that the rest of the paint that I use has something to stick onto. You can see that I've thinned the paint down quite a bit, so it's quite transparent, so I'm going to do a few layers over this. And I'm making sure that there's good coverage across the miniature, just so that we get into all of the cracks and make sure that the layers that we put on later, which will also be quite translucent, have a darker base to start off with so that we're not seeing the raw resin colour afterwards. With the base primed, I want to have a look at the vault. So Greed's Vault is an area in Diablo 3 where the treasure goblins come from and where they go back to take all the things that they've hoarded. And so I want to take a moment to look at the source material and look at how the stone, instead of it being grey, it's gold. It's like a golden brown with green hints to it. And so I want to make sure on the base here we try and emulate that, but do it in reverse. So in the source material you can see that the brighter gold is in the bottom left, quite away from the gold. We're going to invert it so that the brighter section is right by our gold and the darker sections are further away, because that's where our goblin's going to stand, so he'll create shadow. I'm going to start by using some pale greenish yellows, and it doesn't really matter what kind of paints you use. I'm using Death Guard green, and then I'm going to go over it again with a bit of Nurgling green, just to brighten it up again. And the reason this doesn't really matter is because we're going to go over it with yellow washes and glazes to emulate the light being given off by the gold. For a bit of variation, I've added some different colours to the stone. So on the cobblestones which are higher up, I've added more orange colours. And this is done using mostly Deathclaw Brown. And again, once we put on the washes and glazes, it's going to unify all of the cobblestones together, but still give us enough variation where it's not too offensive to the eye. And it still conveys as a singular piece. And then make sure to paint all of the gold and the jewels a bleached sort of white. And then you can see what I've done is I'm trying to single out some of the gems. This is another thing I've not done before, and it's quite hard because they're so small. The red gem is done by just going over the white with Blood for the Blood God. And then with this blue gem, which I keep throwing off camera, which is very frustrating, I'm using a light blue paint. And this is going to act as our darker layer. We're going to alternate with blue to white, and then go over it with a blue glaze, so everything becomes blue, and our the first base layer that we put on acts as our darker side to the jewel, and the white is the brighter side of the jewel where the light is coming through. You can see here I had a bit of overspill from the glaze, so I'm just spreading it out over the green cobblestones. It will fade away as we add in more layers and shades, so it doesn't really matter. I'm just spreading it out instead of worrying about it too much. So the next part here is to just brighten up some of these orange cobblestones. I don't want the orange to show through too much, so I'm going over it with some Xandri dust, which brings it quite close to the Death Guard and Nurgling greens that we used on the other ones. We use quite a thin layer so that the Deathclaw brown that we used before still shows through, so that we have the variation. It's just that the Xandri dust has a lot more yellow in it. A lot more yellow and a lot more greens. And so it binds everything together much better, because we don't want to be looking at the cobbles and going, hey look, these are all different colours, but just have enough variation so it just doesn't look flat. And then when we add our washes and layers, you won't really tell too much. So I forgot to record this section, but what I've done is I've just gone over the white with a bit of Flashgit's yellow, and then I did a bit of Lamenter's yellow, which is the glaze, just to keep it super bright. And now what I'm doing after the glaze is around the gold, because I want the intensity. I'm using the wash, which is Cassandora yellow, and it is a yellow wash, but it's so strong, it's basically orange if you use too much. And what we're doing is we're putting this in there so that we can have the definition of the gold coins and make sure that the cracks and gaps between all of the cobblestones around it are really, really intense and dark, just to show how much lightness is coming off. And then it's going to fade away. So the further away we get from it and we go into this bottom half, we're, instead of going over it with the shade, it's just going to be glazed. And so that will help us to show the difference between the super intense gold light and then the sort of dimmer yellow glow that's just being cast on things that are further away. And this is sort of, it's like a poor man's way of doing a deep shading method without blending too much. So we're not going full non-metallic style, and what I'm doing is just to the edges and just to a very small part, I'm using a bit of Auric Armor Gold, which is probably one of the brightest Citadel golds that I can find. And it's just to add a little glimmer. You can't really see it all that much on the camera, and even in person you can't really see it, but as you turn the piece around, the light will just catch that metallic paint and just add that glisten that you want from treasure. So here you can see that I've messed around with my settings, just trying to sort out the white balance so that the yellow and red aren't ruined by the camera, and I hope this is better. You can really see how the different shades are working now with the white balance fixed, and you can see where those more red cobblestones that we put on, they're almost like a weird sort of purpley brown because of all the washes and everything that we put on top. So there are 2 rings in this treasure, and I'm just going to pick them out with some silver paints. I think some lead belcher and then a bit of iron breaker as well. Nothing too glaringly bright, just enough so you can see, oh look, there's a silver ring here and there's a silver ring there. So the next thing I want to do is this big jewel. This is one of the other big jewels, and I want this to be an emerald. So I'm using the Nurgling green again, so that we're reusing the same colours. And I'm going to alternate it again. So you have... I was supposed to repaint it white, but I didn't. I just left it yellow. So you have some sort of like yellow bits, and then you have some green bits. And we're just alternating it. When that is done, we're going to glaze it again, doing it the same way as I did with the blue. Again, gems I'm not very good at, and these ones are so small you really can't get the detail in with the brushes that I have. I just don't really have the skill set right now to put all the hyper detail, but this is just enough to sell the idea. So it looks like I do go in with a bit of white, and we're just putting it around some of the points of the gold. I think what I'm finding as I'm painting this is that the yellowish orange wash has just been a little too intense, and I want the brightness to come out a bit more. So we're putting down these little dots and scratchings of, I think it's, what's it called? I keep wanting to say bleach bone. That's what it was called when I first did miniatures, but it's not anymore. Oh, here it is. It's called wraith bone. And basically it's just an off-white, and as you can see, as I go over it with the yellow glaze, it's still real bright, but now that we're turning it yellow, it just helps cement the concept that this is a gold glow. Not a really deep orangey brown, but it's gold, it's yellow, and it's quite bright. So it just helps a little bit, just to cement the yellow colour instead of the browns that we have around the edges. So I've gone back to the emerald now, and I'm glazing it very, very lightly with not glaze, sorry, I think I'm washing it actually. I think I'm washing it with Baletown green, which is quite a dark green wash, but I'm using it really thinly, just so that we don't overdo it, because I don't want a really dark emerald. I want quite a bright one. So again, by doing the alternation of the green and the white panels, when we put the wash over it, the ones that were painted green are those really intense dark colours, and then the white ones are still green, but it shows, or at least imitates, the concept of the light coming through. And this is pretty much it. This is done. I painted the jewels on the rings with some more blood for the blood god, and there is one right up in the top corner right now, which is still yellow, and I've just left it as a topaz. I just let the yellow glazes from before just stain it, and we've just left it as it is. So this, I think, is good enough for a first attempt, and I'm pretty happy with it. So if you enjoyed this, please like, subscribe, leave a comment down below.